Hey, everybody. Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. Today's episode number 67. I'm your host, Roman Zelichenko. I am a former immigration attorney turned entrepreneur. I'm the co founder of Laborless, which is an immigration tech startup that focuses on H-1B visa compliance, and also the founder of GMI Rocket, which brings you the show and is a digital marketing agency for the immigration global mobility space. Today, I'm very excited to have Priyank Singh, who is the co-founder and CTO of Stilt, on the show. What I love about today's conversation that we're going to have is it kind of just shows me how broad, depending on how you define immigration tech, how broad it is. I think initially for me as an immigration lawyer, I looked at immigration tech as just tools that, help lawyers fill out forms and put together immigration applications. But I don't know, over time, I've kind of stepped back and realized immigration tech really can, or perhaps should, be technology that supports immigrants throughout the whole journey, from the very beginning when they're, getting ready to move, all the way through the moving process, and afterwards too, when they're settling into their new home country, whether it's the U.S. or somewhere else. And so Stilt is one of these companies. Stilt does a number of things, but their, core kind of offering is a bank loans and providing financial services for immigrants. And we'll get into that. We'll get into how Priyank and his co-founder came up with this idea and how they kind of launched it, and how they were sort of foreign nationals and international students here in the U.S. as well. So very excited for today's episode. And without further ado, Priyank, thank you so much for being here and for joining me on the show.
Hey Roman, thanks for having me here.
Before we get started, just for folks who might be tuning in or watching or listening live, as always, let us know where you're from, where you are, where you work. Give us a shout out, give yourself a shout out, your company, whatever. It's always fun to have some questions and answers. And obviously, as we go along, if you do have any questions for Priyank or for myself as well, please, leave them in the comments, and we'll get to them as we go. So, Priyank, so I wanted to, as I was sharing this podcast across social media, I wanted to write this whole philosophical thing about, like, immigration tech is so much broader than just forms and, support for lawyers. And that's really important. I mean, that's the world that I come from and am in. So I love kind of the idea that, you're a tech company and a FinTech company, that provides sort of financial services for immigrants, something that as a lawyer, I don't even think about. It's like I work with the immigrant, or perhaps their company, if it's a H-1B scenario, on their visa. You get it approved, they move here, and then I know that there are challenges, but you just don't think about that as a lawyer very often. You kind of like move on to the next thing. And so the reality is that there is so much more that immigrants specifically need support and help with in their journey. So I want to kind of learn about you and your life. I mean, you came to the U.S. for graduate school, right? So you spent a number of years, are from India, right? And so you spent a number of years. I mean, what can you share about kind of growing up where you grew up? And I don't know, what was your sort of childhood like? What kind of kid were you?
Oh wow, this is a very interesting question. So yeah, as you said, like I'm from India. Lucknow is the northern part of the India, and pretty normal childhood. Like in India, like when you are growing up, you're like, oh, you want to become engineer, doctor, whatever you want to become. I think for me, when I was in middle school, I started writing code. And the reason why I started doing it, because I got hooked with uh, Dave and Princess of Persia game. So as a kid,
Mm.
when you're going to computer lab, you get chance to play all those things. So I'm like, man, this is so exciting. I have a dedicated hour in my middle school where I can go during that hour and play games. And that was the beginning of me getting hooked on computer. And then I learned basic, then I learned Fox Pro. By high school, I knew C++ very deeply. And I was like, this is the best job ever. I am gonna be inside. I'll be just writing code, and you can do everything with the computer actually. Like the application of computer was so broad and so exciting. It was just amazing. So that passion of writing code and building things and applying computer into multiple area was just got stuck with me. So then I did my undergrad from India, went to Delhi. It's northern part of the India, where went through the entire undergrad. The thing that you might not know about me is like I was too much deep into research when I was in undergrad, and I was fascinated by this idea that computer science is a science, applied science that help others to do their job better.
Mm.
And I got it from my one of my teacher, Sanjay Goyal. He's really forward thinking, and with him I worked with archaeologists to make their life easy. And then I worked with people with a special need, and it was just fascinating, and that motivated me to do more research and further study. And that's what bring me to New York Columbia University, where same thesis. I was working with with the group which is working with Smithsonian Institute in where we were having a leaf sample. You are taking a picture of the leaf, and it's an educational app you work on. It was really fascinating for me. Like, and I think it has been part of my life where I'm using computer science to apply into different fields that can help life of others better. And
Hmm.
it still is one of the example of that, where we are applying computer, as you said, like tech, to to make life of immigrants better in the US. Particularly, being an immigrant when you move to US is not just the paperwork, how you're gonna rent an apartment, how you're gonna get your first phone, how you're gonna get your first credit card. Like it's so much. It makes life so difficult for everyone, for us to be just survive here, and which was really interesting that people who are working so hard coming here for higher education, they have to work extra hard to just live here in the US. And I think that Jill, that motivation kept. I'm still having that, like how we can apply science, computer science, basically in making life of people better. And
Hmm.
FinTech is one example of it. Legal tech is another example of it. So yeah, I think in nutshell, I love computers.
Yeah. It's funny when I was growing up, for some reason, when we got a computer when I was probably in the fifth or sixth grade, and for some reason the computer lived in my bedroom. Not my parents' room, not in the living room where everyone had access to it. It was my room, and it was the same thing. I started building websites. I taught myself HTML when I was like 12 years old. I remember I built a website about my favorite rappers. Like I built a website for DMX. I built a website for like Eve, or all these other rappers. And I don't know why it didn't stick with me, but I remember that joy. Do you remember when I don't know if it was the same thing for you at the time in India, but you could get like games, like CD-ROMs with
Oh yeah,
games,
yeah,
like
yeah,
in the mail, maybe like a free, one level for free, and it was just such a, now there's all this stuff everywhere. I'm curious, when you were playing, you said Prince of Persia, is that right?
yeah, yeah. Prince of Persia and Dave, I think that was the name. Yeah.
How did you were playing the games, but were you able to like code in the game? Like, were you able to get into, like, let's say, the back end of, or the code of the game, or were you saying that just playing with the games made you really kind of enamored with the computer?
I got curious how they built the game actually.
Mm.
And the next thing, the first program I did in my entire life, I still remember. Everything was on MS DOS, and I
Hmm.
was like, when I was born, what day was it? So I wrote a computer program to identify, go back in the history and identify the day when I was born. Was it like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
Uh-huh.
I like, man, let's see coding do it and what you can do. And it took me 2 weeks to do it on a DOS and BASIC, but that there's just that curiosity, like how to do it and what you can achieve was really fun. Um, and I did not exactly understood at that time, Dave, but to the point, like we used to get these magazine like Digit, Chip, and all those things, where you get a DVD and you can install Linux, or you can install games, or you can install a programming language, and you can work with it actually.
Hmm.
And I remember there was one of the something I was working in C or C++ back then, and you can write code to color the screen and create a board and chess and everything. So I started doing that. And I also remember a long time back, like I think well, now it's a long time back, like I think 20 years back or something. I wanted to see how my voice looked like in the waveform. So I recorded
Hmm.
my voice, and you can read, you can plot a graph like how waves look like, and
Hmm.
I did that. It was so fascinating. I was like, man, this is how voice looks like. This is, you can see if you drop a coin, you can see waveform how it's generating. Now it seems easy, and I'm pretty sure back then there must be tools to do it. I was just not aware about it.
Right.
So, and
I was
I
gonna
doing a lot of things.
Well, and my question to too would be just from that period of time. Okay, you're curious, and a lot of kids, think to themselves, "Oh, wow, this is so cool! I can control the character and walk around in this world and whatever." But did you, you were young? I mean, so were you? Did you get books on it? You go into the library or something, or got books? I mean, how, there was no YouTube back then, right? You can't just
Uh,
Google how do you learn how to code.
I read a lot of books.
Yeah,
Back then, we internet was really bad and super
right,
expensive. So it's not like I can do hours and hours of surfing. And plus, like if bills are going up, my parents are like, "What are you doing?" Uh,
right.
um, so I used to spend a lot of time in library. Got like bunch of books in C++ because that's the only language I knew back then.
Hmm.
Uh, and I just read all the books, like, like I think I read like 10 books by the time I was in high school, just on C++ and all, like how to do graphic programming, how to do like really detailed and going in like hardware sort of stuff. And that was really fascinating for me. Like what you are reading in electronics, you can read with computer to electron to diode to physics to this. And I think that's the fascinating part, that we only read about programming and HTML, but when you go into the nitty gritty of how it works, it's much
Hmm.
more fascinating. And I think my teachers were amazing too. Obviously, when I still remember like hogging them after the college and school, and like, oh, how does it work? They're like, okay, they will spend hours with me to
Wow.
tell me. So that helped. And the other part is like friend circle is really important.
Hmm.
So it's not just me, like bunch of us used to write code together and like debug each other's code and make things and push each other, like, oh, I did this, oh, I did that. And that entire ecosystem was super powerful.
That's amazing. That is really, really important. I think my challenge now that when you say that was I didn't have any friends doing the same thing. So it was me sitting at home, writing at that point it was HTML or something. And then all my friends are outside and it's like, well, I want to see them too. So I have to leave the computer. That's
Yeah.
really interesting. So, and another thing I'm curious about before we kind of jump into your, journey here to New York and starting grad school. Did your parents pressure you? I know you said, kind of like the doctor or a lawyer or a computer engineer. I think for me, in my household, I wasn't really pressured in that direction, but I did become a lawyer. So I guess, my parents are both computer scientists. So I think there was some undertone of that. Did your parents or did your family kind of pressure you in that? Or was it just a given that if you have the ability to be educated, you're going to go and become, a computer scientist or a medical doctor or something?
No, there's no pressure. So my dad is an electrical engineer and he did his engineering in 1970, and he still makes fun of me. During his time, computer was one chapter, and in Hindi it's called Abhikalag, which is like, oh, there's a machine which is doing something. So he still makes fun of me, like, oh, that's not even engineering. He's an electrical engineer, which is like transformers, electricity, and the entire thing. I think since childhood I loved math and I loved
Mhm.
science. Uh, Bio or art is something that I never got passion for. Although my sisters, they are really good in those things. So they never pressured me. I remember, like I still remember when there was a time to choose, like what do you want to do, math or science or this. They left me alone, like, it's your choice, whatever you want to do it. And I picked computer because, first of all, my dad is electrical engineer. He used to go out like in summer in India and get things done. I don't want to go out in summer. It's
Hmm.
gonna be inside a room with AC on and try.
That's a very practical reason to go into computer
Yeah,
science.
yeah, that's the best engineer I can think of, and I just did it. So it come back to, that I'm pretty sure you must have read Outlier, that 10,000 hour rule or something. The more you do, the more better you get, and that's kind of drive your passion. I think
Mhm.
that's what happened with me. I was writing code, I was doing these things, so it was not even a second guess for me that I need to do something else. I like, I just want to do what I'm good at it and I enjoy it. So why not do it for entire life? It's much more fun.
That's amen. That's amazing. So before I want to jump into your, your journey over to the U.S. Before we do, just a couple comments here from Sohail Husseini saying greetings from Ottawa. How you doing? And thank you for joining. And Syed Ali saying in from Cleveland, Ohio. So
Oh,
we've got an international crowd from
nice.
Canada and U.S. And thanks for joining, Syed, as always. Again, for folks watching, let us know where you are, where you work, where you're located, what the weather is like there. Um, and of course ask us any questions, especially as we get into more about Stilt. So Priyank, at this point, I want to know about, okay, you clearly love engineering. You're definitely good at it because you're learning it. You're doing it on your own. You're spending time with your kind of friends, and you're hounding professors to learn more and dive deeper. So there's definitely a passion and talent there. Um, what was your decision to apply for a student visa to come to the US, and sort of what was that process like? Because I think clearly here, is where your introduction to the immigration process, at least personally, gets started. So I'm curious kind of what made you choose to do that, because you probably could have stayed and worked at a company in India or what have you, for longer. Um, yeah. So what made you choose that, and sort of how did you feel going through the immigration process?
Um, so being very honest, when I was graduating from my college, I had a good job and I never thought that I want to go for higher education. Bunch of my friends, they moved to Bay Area, actually moved to US, and they went to Stanford of the world and all those good universities. I think one of the trigger was I knew that I want to do something interesting and do something in research, because in my undergrad I published like 3 research papers. So we went and did the proper publication, did a presentation. So it was really so I remember in my sophomore year I did my first research paper, and when we did the presentation it was an international crowd, and that was my first time meeting people from different countries. And it was one of the conference going on. We did a paper, we presented that paper, and everybody was clapping. It's because we were the youngest in that entire conference, and it was really, really, really empowering. I still remember that. And I think that helped us to be more motivated towards doing more research oriented work and building new things. So that paper was applying computer science in archaeology, and we cut down the work for them what they used to spend 1 month into 1 minute actually.
Wow.
So and they were really happy with it. They got so excited. They came in the conference and talked about, oh, can you guys do this? Can you do this rendering? Can you do that? Can you do that? And that just showed like the power of computer science, actually, how you can impact someone's life in such a way that's like mind blowing. So there was always an inkling that I want to do more research, I want to study more, I want to see that. But like after undergrad, one of the thing was like education is expensive in the US. So I was like, man, that masters and grad school is super expensive. Maybe it's not my cup of tea, and I'm just gonna work. But in 2007 there was a recession going on. So I got laid off from 3 jobs actually back to back after college. I was one of the 9 pointers, like I think second rank in the entire college. I got the best job in the college and all those things. Um, I remember, without going to detail, like back to back in 3 months, I got 3 jobs and I got laid off from all 3 of them. And then I ended up joining one company. And by that time, I was like, it's so bad. I think the better thing for me is to go to next phase of education and see what are the other options available. So I think then I started going through the process about GRE and TOEFL and so on. And at that time I did not know about the immigration that well, because the first thing is get into a college and then the second thing is getting to visa. um, it was nightmare to figure out what document to do, you were getting mixed messages that, oh, they might say no in the interview for XYZ region. You need documentation, you need financial support documentation. I don't know how the relative situation work. Oh, if I have a family there, they're gonna say something. So just creating the F1 document interview was tough. And then second, not knowing what the interview process is gonna look like was very, very scary. Because there are like few communities where you can go and ask questions. Facebook was not that popular back then. Um, so it was very tough to get information actually. And I was really nervous in my F1 interview, although it lasted for 2 minutes. I mean, they were really nice. They're like, oh, you're going to Columbia University. Here you go, stamp, done. The entire preparation and moment leading towards that was really stressful. And I think getting visa and then landing in the New York first time and don't know what to do next was really interesting. But But in Columbia University, one good thing they do, there are a lot of the batch which is coming after you, the previous batch, they let you stay with them for a few days and they tell you like do's and don'ts, which is super helpful. We did that too. Is pay as forward sort of thing. You help next, they help next, and they help next. But yeah, that process was really interesting.
I mean, this goes to show how important it is for university, especially to have a good international students and scholars office, and to have your DSO, and to
Yeah.
just have a support network there. I'm curious, when you finally landed in the U.S., especially in New York. I mean, I'm from New York, and I was just walking around today, and I mean, I love my city. Don't get me wrong, but I was like, man, it's so dirty here. Like, there's just garbage around, and I mean, I'm sure there's something happened. Maybe a garbage truck, something fell off of it. But I'm just wondering, in general, you came here. What were some of your kind of initial maybe impressions of coming into New York City and starting to attend really one of the best known and old universities of the world?
So the thing is, when I landed, I was worried about my phone, where I'm gonna live, where I'm gonna open my bank account. I got this traveler's check. I don't know what to do with it. So I really did not enjoy that initial wow moment, like when I landed. And the second thing, you're like, oh, looks like an Indian city. Like so many people, the same, like back home. So it didn't feel that different. Like people were, and the best thing in New York, like everybody is like so focused on their work. They are super helpful, so focused on the work. Um, so it didn't feel that odd, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I think it actually hit after a month when I had an apartment, I had a phone and everything. It's the time when college is about to start in a week and you have settled down. I got part-time job and everything. Like, oh damn, I'm gonna go into Columbia University. Let's check around. Like, oh, this is a library, this is a college, and oh, these are the teachers. The profs were those are profs. I used to read their books actually. So it's like fascinating. Like you read their book and you never imagined that you'll be going into their college. So
Mm-hmm.
it was really fascinating. Like I remember going through meeting friends from different countries and sharing that experience was really fun.
So we have just a few more comments here I want to bring up. So Marianne says, hi from sunny and
Thanks.
clear San Francisco. That's where you are, Priyank,
Yeah,
right?
that is
Yeah.
really sunny today. Yeah.
You guys are lucky. We got some clouds here in New York. Marianne says, sorry about the layoff so quickly back to back. Yeah,
Thanks.
it does take strength to move forward. I can imagine how, even if you have the confidence of having had good grades and people, it's just, it sucks. I mean, at some point you might think to yourself, like, what's going to happen? So it's nice that you actually showed up here. And I want to get to that in a moment. And the last comment, Syed says his family's from
Oh,
Lucknow.
nice.
Yeah. So they migrated to Pakistan in 47. So maybe there's some old connections somewhere in the families.
Yeah.
Um, that's cool. Okay, so Priyank, this is where I want to talk about you meeting Rohit, who is now your co-founder at Stilt. Can you just talk a little bit about that? I know he's not here for this interview, but just from your perspective, sort of, how did you guys get together? Because I know after you guys graduated from Columbia, you kind of went your separate ways. You worked at other companies, and then you eventually reconnected to effectively create Stilt. But what was that first kind of, when you guys first met? And I don't know, did you start thinking about ideas then, or were you just friends?
Not at Columbia. I think the way we met is well, the problem that we are solving is the problem how we met actually. So I moved to US in 2009, and Rohit was here in 2010. So he came here after me, and he was trying to find an apartment without SSN and Social Security, and he doesn't want to, having that huge deposit is too much for one person. Like if you don't have SSN, you have to put down 3 or 4 month deposit actually upfront. So we are looking for he was looking for a place to stay, and he ended up doing couch surfing in my apartment and eventually became one of the roommate. That's how we met. Um, so I think during that time, just we used to chat and talk, and just like any other college friend, we used to hang out. Um, and it didn't hit us that time because I think we didn't know that we can solve this problem. To be honest, we were so much into our own problem at that time. Oh, when we are gonna graduate? Oh, I'm gonna pay fee for my next semester? Oh, am I gonna get a job or not? All those worry in the college are there. So you don't think about solving. At least I didn't think about solving the problem, because first you need to solve your basic needs, and then you can worry about the other things. Um, so we met there, and obviously we became friends, we know each other. And then I moved to Seattle, I went to Microsoft, and he went to Verix Analytics. He started doing more. um, he started building risk model for banks and doing a lot of data analysis for credit card risk and all. And I think in 2014 or 15, when I moved to Bay Area, um, we both were, after 5 6 years, we were at the same place. And that's when we started writing code and trying out a bunch of ideas. Like, oh, you know what, let's try this out, let's try a bunch of ideas. This was by no means still was our first try. We tried a bunch of other ideas, like um, I'm not going to go into that. It's like a lot of crazy ideas, but
Well, hold
what
on. What can you share one? Can
so
you share one crazy idea?
So one of the idea was, we were trying to say, like, there's Uber, Lyft, DoorDash at that time, and we were thinking we can create an app where we will tell driver which one of the service they should work for that will optimize their pay.
Hmm.
So, like, if I'm Uber driver and I'm seeing like maximum money DoorDash is giving me for next 1 hour, I'm gonna do that job rather than going for Uber or Lyft. So it is optimizing income for these drivers. But the problem was, we don't have data access from Lyft and Uber and all those things. So that's one of the idea we worked on. Um, and when we were doing the experimentation, we just thought about, like, oh, how did we meet? And one of the idea was, this just struck to us, like, oh, there are people like us who are facing the problem. That's how we met. Rohit faced the problem, I faced the problem because when I moved here, I did not have enough, 2 years of 1.5 years of education loan. And I thought, like, I can get loan in the US from any bank, but obviously they said no. And Rohit faced the same problem, renting an apartment to other thing. So we thought, like, why don't we solve this problem? Because we know inherently people who are coming for grad school, they are like hardworking, going to go to school, they will be better for risk. Um, so our first tagline was, as you know, it was loan for Indian students in the US. That's how we started, because I thought only Indian students who are coming to US face this problem. And we thought, like, we'll start giving out loan. And the first loan that we gave was, I gave out from my saving, because it was a risk we are taking. But we also believe that immigrants are fundamentally very they are like hardworking, they will pay back. And so we ended up giving $5,000 of a loan to first borrower with a really bad website, very bad process at that time. And we just gave out loan. It just went into that direction, and then we gave out all of our saving. We took loan from our friends, we gave out their money, then we got into Y Combinator. Then it picked up from there. But yeah, it started with the fact that we realized, like, oh, we face the problem, there must be others who face the problem. And we saw like it picked up really well. I went into San Jose State University, talked about what I do, helped them out with their resume, and we got hundreds of students actually applying for a loan and asking for like advice and a lot of other factors. So it just shows that there is a financial component to it, obviously, that they need loan, but it also showed that like there is no other option. Like even unfortunately, even now, it's just banks, other financial institutes are so much focused on credit history, SSN, and other factor that they are missing out on a bigger audience. And
Mhm.
that's a good thing about us. I think that's why we exist. We are able to capture that.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, there's so much there to unpack. I mean, I think the one really interesting idea there is you guys both obviously went your separate ways. I know Rohit went to Verisk, and then I think Pop Sugar he worked at, and you went to Microsoft and then Amazon, or Amazon and Microsoft. So you both had great jobs. I mean, that's the point. I mean, that's the dream. You come to the U.S., you study, you get your engineering degree, you go on to get a great job, you move up. You hopefully you get your green card and you kind of settle down maybe, or potentially move home or whatever it might be. But the idea of education and a good job here is in some ways the kind of American dream or immigrant dream maybe. But I think it's a really interesting that you guys looked at that problem that you both had, and you just put your own money into it just to try to solve it. Like that doesn't sound like a tech company to me. That sounds like you were like a neighborhood bank. You know what I mean? You probably, I guess you had a website and some sort of a brand, but it sounds like you pooled money together and you said, look, we now have some capital. We fundamentally believe that immigrants are good for their loan. Especially your target audience first was these immigrant international students from India. I'm sure a lot of them studied engineering, and you're like, look, they're going to get a good job. It's almost guaranteed. There's a lot of need for those skills. They're going to pay us back. I just think that's cool from a tech company standpoint, because you started in a very non-tech way. I'm curious, just kind of in those early days, and I asked this because again, I started this show wanting to highlight entrepreneurs who are building businesses around the immigration industry and sort of what they had to go through, because there's not a lot of that. You can hear about how Uber started and Facebook, but if you're trying to build something for the immigration space, sometimes it doesn't quite relate because there are different nuances. So I'm curious, what were maybe some of the challenges that you came across in the early days when you were first trying to prove out this business model and get things going? You said one of them was that you couldn't loan money from banks, so you had to take your savings and borrow money from friends and family to then loan out to
Right.
students. But I'm wondering, were there any other kind of challenges or things that maybe right now you look back on and that you could maybe give advice on, or something like that?
So bunch of things look, I mean, you said it actually. The thing is that when you start, you are not doing almost anything which is scalable actually, because first of all, you don't know what are the scalable thing at that time, so you don't want to optimize for wrong variable, right?
Mm.
Second, the thing is, you want to experiment faster, so you want to try a bunch of things and see what's going to work. I mean, debt capital, getting funding for the loan was one issue, but at the same time, in early days, we did not have ACH API, so we did not have capability to transfer money and get money from our borrower. So me and Rohit used to run around and deposit checks in every bank. Like, oh, Citibank, let's go there, check it. Bank of America, do it. Because we did not have APIs to transfer money at that time. And I think for like about 1 to 2 years, we relied on our customers to transfer money back to us because we did not have capability to debit money from their account.
Mm-hmm.
So we used to send them reminder, and like immigrants are really nice. I mean, but really also there's an emotional component attached to it because we help them at the time of their need. They have a strong bond with us, and they have become eventually champions for us. And they used to transfer money back on their own actually without us, like a lot of pinging them or doing a lot of stuff. And collecting payment was one of the big issue at that time. How we're gonna do it? I'm giving $5,000 to someone hoping he will pay back in 12 installment in 12 months. So that was the another issue. Um, at that time we didn't know what growth metrics are going to work for us. So did a lot of, I went into universities, gave talks. I one other thing I did in New York, I took the path. So from New York to New Jersey, you take path for traveling. So a lot of students who are in NYU or Columbia, they live in New Jersey. So they always take these path trains to go around. So I used to get on that train and start conversation with them. Like, oh, they had a backpack, and you can see like they are really tired and sleep deprived most likely. And then struck a conversation. Hey, are you guys are studying at NYU? Have that conversation. Tell them about Stilt. Educate them about Stilt, and they will ask more question. And I was trying to create those. First of all, I was trying to understand the customers as well, like what they are looking for and how we can build better product. But at the same time, we are telling them about Stilt. So that early days and early customer base, like we got, I think for about 1 or 2 years, we got all the customers through organic channels. We wrote a lot of blog posts. We reach out to customers on one-on-one basis, and that has been the most biggest driving factor for us even right now.
I love that, and I'm sure if you can empathize with them, because if you get into a conversation with another international student, especially if they might be from India, you've been there, you understand what they're going through, and so there's a trust factor there, and it is crazy that you gave out money, hoping really that people would pay you back. I mean, I wonder. I mean, the lawyer brain in me is like, well, what legal I'm sure there was some paperwork that they signed and whatnot, but
I mean, yeah, we did go through legal process.
yeah,
I ended up reading a lot of legal stuff, asking for lawyers. So apparently there are laws in which, like in New York, you can lend out up to a certain amount, up to a certain APR. I think all the laws are around, like if you're trying to charge aggressively, like 100% APR and super aggressive rate. We never did that, and we even
right.
don't do it right now. So like states like New York, obviously, like you have to read deeper in the regulations. um, some states allow you to lend out money without licenses, and identifying those states was the key. So we ended up talking to a lot of founders, we ended up talking to a lot of lawyers, doing a lot of our own research, reading all the law, and asking for clarification from lawyers, or even calling regulators actually. Hey, we want to do this. Do you think it's wrong? And we did a lot of hustling during early days and got these data. And that's how we started doing, okay, let's do for this state because they let us lend out money.
Hmm.
And over the time, obviously, we ended up working with law firms who helped us to build a better compliance. But in early days, yeah, it was like entire scrapey work, like get the law firms, they are expensive, so how we can cut down the cost. Talk to regulators, they are the source of truth actually. And they're really nice. You talk to them, they educate you, you work with it. So a lot of yes, I ended up reading a lot of legal stuff as a
Hmm.
part of building the
I'm
company.
I'm sorry. As a lawyer, I'm sorry. Um, I want to very quickly just because I want to dive into now kind of what Stilt does today and kind of where the company's going. But before we get that, I very briefly I want to hear about your maybe experience or some of the things you took away from YC. I know that's a lot of companies apply for YC every year. Like the dream is to get there, and you obviously by the time you applied for YC, it sounds like you had given out some loans. You put your own savings on the line. You put other people's savings on the line. So you had proven out something there, and I guess YC took an interest in the idea. And you guys are doing great today. So another hopefully successful choice on their end. But when you were going through YC, I'm just curious, as somebody who hadn't or hasn't, what were some of the things you took away from maybe the mentors there or the other companies that were there? Anything you can share.
Sure. I mean, it's not just took away. We are still part of YC. So starting a company, and I'm pretty sure you will be able to correlate. Like when you start a new company or anything new, you don't have that support system, basically emotional support system. Being very honest, like look, YC brand name is really good, and hiring, fundraise, and all those are like very obvious. The other part that you don't know about is like you have a very trusted group of folks whom you can go and talk about things. Like we know if we had at that time when we were talking, we have to find the compliance issue which we did not know. We'll go to people, go to companies who are fintech or founders who are fintech founders and ask them, oh, what do you think about these things? How to approach? What should we do? We don't have money, because they have gone through the same phase, and which is really powerful learning that we hear from them. Um, so I think that at the core of it, the YC community is really powerful, and it's a very trustworthy community. You can go to them and talk to them, and they you will find someone who has solved the problem actually that you're trying to solve. If even if they are not, you can bounce back ideas with them and try to come to a conclusion. So it's really helpful in strategy and a lot of other factors. So I think we still rely a lot on our YC network. I still talk to my friends, and constantly we are like, oh, what do you guys think about this and that? Because every year when we add more new people, they are coming out with more new ideas actually, and they are working on something new, like crypto, NFTs, and all those things, which I tried studying everything, but when I talk to a founder, like, oh yeah, okay, so this is what it is. Okay, this is how what I understand. So it is really powerful for particularly for first-time founders who don't know where to start, um, and it help you to think in the right way about starting a company. They tell us from day one, like, it's a marathon, so you should take care of yourself and everything, which is very counterintuitive, because you got into YC, now you have to work really hard and meet all the metrics, but like, no, you have to focus on overall health of yourself and your company. That's how you make a good company. You don't rush into things. uh,
That's actually really good to hear that they say that, because I think, overworking and undersleeping is still kind of glorified. And so it's
yeah,
nice that if the one of the leading incubators, accelerators of the world is recommending to their cohorts, to also take care of themselves, and hopefully that thesis will trickle down, right?
yeah, yeah. But they also say like your metrics needs to go up,
Right.
so you have to balance it out. But
Right.
um, I think at the end of the day, and the second part is like the YC, the folks who are at YC, like all the mentors, they have built the companies. So it's easy to correlate and empathize better in the situation. Um, and we do the same thing when the new cohort is coming and they want to do fintech. A lot of them come to me and Rohit and like, oh, how can we do this? How can we do this? And we help them to navigate how to make a good company.
Mhm.
So it's really powerful in that way.
Amazing. Yeah, that's really cool. I went through the YC startup school a couple of years ago with Laborless. I mean, it's not the real accelerator, but it's like an 8 week or something program, and I found even that to be incredibly helpful. Just to
Yeah.
have a cohort of people. I still keep in touch with a few of them who are starting certain things. Some of them are still going, some of them aren't, but um, that's really cool. Um, just I wanted to bring up, Marianne said, I love the idea of maximizing income re Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash. You should still pursue that. So, I guess, Priyank, you probably have many ideas. So if you ever exit from Stilt, I'm sure you can maybe hash up some old ideas and try them
Yeah,
out.
maybe.
All right. So I want to jump into what does Stilt do today,
Mhm.
and what's the benefit, or where do you guys come in to help the immigrant community or population, and others? Because I think you support immigrants as where you started, but there are many people who don't have access to loans and banks, where your model, I guess, is helpful. So yeah, can you walk me and the listeners through kind of what Stilt does, and what's your value?
Definitely. So obviously, we started with a very niche. We started with the Indian international insurance, but what we learned over the time that people, it doesn't matter which country you belong to, when you move from country A to country B, you face the same problem, because in a new country you have to start from scratch. You have to build trust with the financial system, and then you only get a good product. Now it's a chicken egg problem, because if you're not getting a product, you cannot prove yourself to financial institute. So what we learned during the time building Stilt, there are multiple things. One of the key thing is that uh, we were amazed to see how many people face this problem in their different part of their life. We used to think only international students are facing the problem, but pretty recently we funded loan to VP of engineering for neobanks and Goldman Sachs and Amex executive who are moving to US from their home country.
Hmm.
So um, it was very interesting to see that the problem that we are solving impact folks into multiple stages of their life, not just like international students. Uh, and eventually, at this moment, I think we have customers from about 160 countries who have been in
Wow.
the US and with different stages of life. Some of them took loan for traveling to moving expense to getting apartment deposits to getting married to like a lot of use cases which we never thought it will be the case. So right now the entire focus of the company is to go and help and fund these immigrants who don't have a long enough credit history in the US. It takes about 5 to 7 years of it takes about 5 to 7 years for you to build a decent credit history to be approved for $40,000 of unsecured personal loan, which we can do. We can approve up to $40,000 of loan to folks with very limited credit history or no credit history actually. And the entire focus of the company is to support the population who are falling into that criteria, and immigrants, refugees, DACA holders, asylum, even US citizens like college students who are graduating, they are also applying for loan because they don't have long enough credit history. So one of our product, which is consumer focused product, is completely doing serving the need of a population who are thin to no profile customer but who are really good. And we are starting with very low interest rate. We are funding them and they are paying back. What we also did is we are working on this product where whatever learning we got in the last few years of lending out money, we started exposing that tech to other institutes so that they can empower their customers and they can give out loan to their customers. And that is really powerful because now we can get to more customers and help more people. So we have APIs where businesses are integrating with it and they are using that API to fund the loan to their consumers.
So it's like a B2C play initially, and then you're saying that now there's going to be, in addition to that, kind of a B2B focus. So it's like you're still supporting your target customers, but then you're basically almost white labeling your infrastructure and everything that you guys have built
Right,
to other businesses to use, because you're not going to get their customers. They have their own business, they have their own
right.
target audience. You're going to allow them to loan out money to their customers using your tools, using your, I guess, using your financial
Underwriting
backing
and
as well.
yeah, I mean, it depends with whom we are talking with, but
Right.
basically, the risk models, the compliance piece, and everything, the tech that we build,
Hmm.
that we can white label it for them, and they can use it to serve their customer. They can either bring their own debt capital if they have money, or we can also help them with that. But the entire goal is to launch more credit product. Basically it can be build credit product, it can be loan, it can be line of credit, like multiple products that we can offer. And basically just the idea is like we have built these technology which is really good, which is not relying on credit reports and SSN and a lot of other factors. I mean, it's good to have it if they have, but if they don't have it, still we can serve them. So
I'm,
yeah.
I'm, I'm, I'm curious, Priyank, if you can share. I mean, I obviously understand that that's probably your secret sauce, but I mean, what do you guys look at then? Because I get it. I mean, a company wants to see your credit history. They'll give you out $300, and then they'll raise your credit line to $600, and then over time you can show that you pay things back. That makes logical sense to me. But to your point, of course, that means that people who don't have years of credit experience, but who might need it right away, don't have access to it. So I don't know, like, what do you guys look at? I mean, I know it's easy to say, oh, well, I know I'm an immigrant and I'm going to get a good job. And so I'll be able to pay this back in a year. But how do you yeah, how do you systematize that?
No, that's a good question. And being very honest, we are learning and we are growing and we are improving that as we are doing more population. But at high level, it's a very simple thing. The way to think about it, like if Roman has to give money to Priyank, what are the factors you're going to look for? First, whether my intent is right or not, whether I want to pay you back, whether I'm going to have money to pay you back or not, and whether I'm going to be in the US for long enough to pay you money back or not. So those are the three factors what you look for. And there are different ways you can derive that. You can look into education, employment, you can look into transactions, you can look into whether this person has paid his bills on time or not. Because all of us have phone these days, all of us have internet. Are you respecting a small enough contract in your life to pay money back to a phone provider or not? Is a very good indication actually.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of factors like that. um, Credit history is very limited even for US citizen actually. It doesn't consider if you're not using credit card, or let's say if someone is paying their bills on time, it doesn't reflect properly in the credit report, although they are working on it to do it. Also, it doesn't talk about your saving rates. It doesn't talk about like, if you get $100, what is the rate of spending? A lot of other factors that you can look into, which help you to understand more about immigrant and other population.
Mm.
Um, so I know I gave you a very vague answer, but at high level, those are the characteristics that we try to look at, and then you collect data accordingly and see and try to figure it out.
It's a really good point, because I just set up auto pay for something, and most of these auto pay, kind of automation setup things are coming from it's not based on my credit card, it's based on my checking account or savings account. And so I wonder, now you're making me think, like, does that build into my credit score? I don't know. I mean, maybe the answer is yes, but I just think some of these organizations, like, I'm paying on time, but if you don't see that I'm paying it on time, then, and you're not looking for it, you're not asking. So yeah, it's an interesting point. I wish more people took credit card for auto pay, but I also understand that they want to pull from direct cash. They don't want to, they don't want the whole credit card layer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And particularly for immigrant, the nature is not credit card based. Like in India, people don't use credit. At least when 10 years, 20 years back, it's more cash driven economy. We nowadays we have PTMs of the world and wallet of the world where you can use it. It didn't exist, right? So we are not trained. None of us are trained from day one to use credit card. Which might be a good thing actually. You are not using credit card from day one, but all of a sudden we are expected to do these things. And um, this is a very important point too, because one big thing what we do is we write a lot of content for financial literacy and education and how to do things. Because what we learned is most of the time people don't even know what are bad for them in credit history. Like you don't know that auto pay is good or bad. You don't know. Some people might not know that paying on time is how important it is actually. So um, that's another big piece which is missing in entire financial system, where how you literate people. Financial literacy is so important, and we are not constantly telling people like this is the most important thing you have to worry about.
Yeah, and honestly, even as somebody who grew up here, we don't learn that in high school. You don't learn that. You just have to, like, find out somehow. I mean, now there's much more information on the internet, and there's probably YouTube channels that make it easy. But I know that when I was, we had an economics class in college, in high school, I'm sorry, and we didn't learn. I mean, we learned virtually nothing about balancing a checkbook and why credit is important, or the challenges there. So yeah, I mean, you guys put out a ton of content around financial literacy, frankly, that I've even read for myself, even though I'm not an immigrant. Well, I am an immigrant, but at this point I'm a U.S. citizen. Um, that's super cool. And I'm interested, I guess, the B2B process, or the B2B service that you're offering, I guess that's pretty new, right? And so
Yeah,
you guys are
we're
just
still
getting
in
started.
early days. A couple of folks are integrating. We're still in early. We'll see how things are gonna pan out.
Yeah.
But the idea, high level, is that we always have this idea of sharing our knowledge actually with others, so that what we learned others can use and do a better job as well. um, and it's coming from that thesis actually, because me and Rohit kind of educate a lot of founders who are trying to do fintech, like how to do a good fintech. And basically it came very natural and organic for us that, oh, whatever we are telling, maybe we can create a product for it for others, and they can build a good company out of it. So yeah, it's early days. People are doing integration. Let's see how it goes. Maybe 2022 is gonna be the year.
Yeah, I hope so. That's awesome. So as we kind of wrap up here, I'm curious. You came here as an F1 student, and then you got your H1B visa, right? For your jobs, and you went through that whole process. Your company now supports a lot of different folks, but still many folks who come in as F1 students. Maybe they're coming in as an H1B worker right away, whatever it might be. I don't know. What are some of your thoughts on maybe immigration and uh, any, like, from your vantage point, right? Like, I know that you're not really in the legal or policy side of things, and you're more of the kind of supporting of the immigrant, of the person when they're here. But I guess, I don't know, what would you love to see? Like, if you could kind of snap your fingers, what would you love to see that you think could make things better for the immigrant experience?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess we are moving in that direction. Like in all honesty, like with all in last 2 to 3 years, um, we started seeing a lot more companies who are serving immigrants, and they are going into more niche. Like there are companies who are focused on Asian grocery delivery, like we. There are companies who are doing very there are companies like we are focused on the media content and a lot of other factors. I think in ideal world, uh, and particularly with COVID, things has gotten much worse actually, because when you're moving from one country to another country, there are like 50 regulation you have to constantly keep track of. And oh, if I'm traveling to US, there's a 24 hours before test, and I'm traveling to India, there are 3 days before antigen test, and then the type of tests are different. And I'm pretty sure if you're going to travel, you're going to see all those regulations and try to figure it out. Uh, I honestly think we are at a stage where we can streamline that process, because we can have a better communication among country, at least for traveling purpose, like for visa and B1 and B2 and H1. Um, Obviously, like I'm not going to comment on what the H1B policy should be and all
Mhm.
those things, but I think it doesn't matter what policies are. But once we have given visa to someone, or once we have decided they can come in, that process need to be super amazingly smooth. it, I don't even remember the days. I don't know, in New York it might be still true. Like in Uber, is seamless experience. You go in, you get out, auto detect your payment. You don't have to worry about cash or anything like that. In early days, it used to be you're getting on a cab, sitting inside, swapping your card, finding out cash, giving cash, waiting for cash to happen, get the change, and then get out. Right, like that. That process was there. It was more human, but it was not very efficient. Now it's like you don't even have to think about it. So I think the entire immigration is very complicated right now. The end experience is not good enough as a product. It should be very smooth. You get into a plane, you got visa, you got approved. It should be just walked through in the border, at least for the people who have valid visa, who have gone through this process of US embassy to get the visa, interview, then having another interview on at the airport where you are going through the queue and getting things done. It just doesn't make sense to me why we are doing these things multiple times. So I think with the current information sharing, and at the current stage where we have technology where you can do a lot of validation of document online and do video call validation and this and that, I think we can streamline a lot of process much faster, and make the end user experience amazing. It's just we haven't thought about doing it yet.
And that's the hope for me, with conversations like this, because again, when I thought about immigration tech in the very beginning, it was the forums, it was the legal process, and it's just thinking about how much more opportunity there is within the whole immigration journey to bring in technology, to bring in automation, or maybe even without technology, but to build services to help people with certain things that traditionally they had to figure out on their own. I think there's a lot of opportunity to make the whole uh, the journey easier and better, especially given how difficult it is personally for someone who's moving and relocating, and maybe even taking their family. So yeah, I agree with that, and I appreciate what you guys are doing at Stilt, because I think it's touching on something that a lot of people maybe don't think about, especially on the lawyers, or at least from my experience. Perhaps this is something that lawyers and immigration service providers can think about more. And frankly, when I think about it, I worked in the employment immigration context. And so for me, my clients were companies and they had really good support systems for their clients. But I'm just thinking, if I was a family immigration attorney, or if I worked with small companies that maybe relied on me for a lot more than just the visa, but just insight, I feel like, I mean, I'm kind of plugging you guys, but I feel like immigration lawyers should be, hey, congratulations on your visa. Here's some of the next steps you should think about. By the way, when you enter the US, here's an option for some ways to potentially, if you need to get money for an apartment or to get a car or to whatever, like check out Stilt to be able to get help with your loan. I mean, that was totally a plug. But I just, as I'm thinking about it, it makes sense because it's something that, again, lawyers are not, it's not our job to help the immigrants settle in, that directly. But given that there are more and more companies to do that, it could be our job to at least share the resources with them that are available.
Right. Makes sense. I mean, I think there are boundaries we created. Oh, this is the legal stuff, this is the finance stuff.
Right.
And that end-to-end experience is broken, that's why. And someone need to drive that and link everyone and try to do it. So you're right. Like, it start from either legal, it can also start from us, like, from H1B you want to get to green cards, we might say like, look, come to us, we'll help you, here's a counseling, free counseling on what to do next. So things need to be more tightly coupled to have a better experience. Right now it's very decoupled, right?
Yeah, I guess you're right. I'm sort of thinking it's like we're putting it in silos, and really that's the whole antithesis of where things are going, where we want to break down silos and have information sharing. Man, it's really cool. I want to ask you, I want to kind of end on this question, but I'm curious, you came here, you were living in New York. I know you're now in the Bay Area. What's kind of a fun memory that you have from New York that you'll never forget from your time here as a student or afterwards?
Wow. I was stuck in Colombia for 36 hours. We had a snowstorm, and I remember I couldn't even open the door because it was 5 feet of snow. So we had to stay in the library for 24 hours. Thank God we had cafeteria which was open, so we had food and coffee. But I think it was in the first year, so it was very, fun experience because I'm coming from India. I never saw snow. But at the same time, like, damn, I'm stuck here. What should I do? So I still remember, like waiting for snow to shovel and door to open, and then getting out and seeing New York. Oh, everywhere there's snow white, and it was fun. It was, I cannot forget that. Like, it was once in a lifetime experience where you are stuck, but you're inside the building, so it's not hurting me in any way. But it was fun.
And you're not stuck just inside any building. You're stuck inside Columbia University. That's incredible.
Yeah. And I used to do night out study session. So for me, it was like, oh, it's fine. I'm gonna spend one more night. It doesn't matter.
Wow. That's so cool. Yeah, thank God you guys had a cafeteria open and you had some food. That's amazing. That's cool. Now you're making me wish for a snow day because I want to. I mean, the dream is to look outside of New York City and see pearly white, all the cabs covered in snow. Because as you know, it snows the second it stops. In 2 hours, it's disgusting slush everywhere. Oh, yeah. So it goes from really beautiful to really gross in a matter of hours. So that's really awesome. Well, Priyank, thank you so much. This was just such a fun and interesting conversation. It's really cool to hear about what you guys are doing and where you're moving forward with Stilt. And thanks for supporting the immigrant community. As an immigrant myself, I'm sure my family could have probably used Stilt and been able to maybe take out more a loan or something in the beginning. So I think it's great what you guys are doing and the support you bring to the community. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Roman, for having me here. It's great that I'm so happy to see you are focused on immigrant tech. Actually, there's a word now, immigrant tech, where people are focused on doing it. So I'm pretty sure, 20, 30 years down the road, we'll look back and like, oh, we started this, and see how big it has become. So thanks for having me here. It was a fun conversation for sure.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
All right, everybody. Thanks for being here. What an awesome, just really interesting conversation. I love the idea of technology in this aspect, or in this sense, helping immigrants throughout their kind of regular daily life, and not really necessarily on the legal side of things, which is frankly where I'm at, and what I always constantly focus on. So thanks everybody for being here, Marianne and Syed, Sohail, and anybody else who is here listening. I know sometimes folks are like, yeah, I'm here, and then you just say thanks at the very end, which is awesome. But then I don't know if you're here. I can't actually see it while I'm doing this live stream. So for anyone else who's here, thank you as always. I'm actually going out of the country. I'll be going to Italy in a day, and working from there. So I'm not going to be doing the GMI Rocket Show until March. So we will be back in March, but we have guests already lined up for March, and I'm just excited to have more of these conversations. Thank you all again, and stay warm if you're in cold winter areas right now. Okay. Cheers. Peace.